So a major offensive that has been planned for some time now has begun in the city of Mosul, and it's interesting. Well, it's interesting for a lot of reasons. One, just the basic details. So it's a combination of forces: Iraqi government forces, or the Peshmerga from Kurdistan, along with some Shia militias, along with it's just about 5 different forces that are pushing back against ISIS in what's left of, this is like the last major stronghold in Iraq for ISIS. And so Mosul is is a major industrial city. There's still about 1.5 million people left in the city. The offensive began today, and there is no predicted timeline when it's going to end. However, the government officials have been blanketing the city with pamphlets, letting people know, letting civilians know to stay inside. The problem with that is that it is believed that ISIS is using those people as human shields. In addition to using the people as human shields, they've dug 7 by 7 foot deep trenches around the city, where they are using them as trenches for oil to set on fire as another shield. It is a major offensive. You will recall about 2 years ago, ISIS swept down from Syria in a blitz and took the city, embarrassing the Iraqi forces. This was the onslaught that had they really destroyed and chased away Iraqi forces. The Iraqi forces 2 years ago basically laid down their arms and left, and basically turned over the city to ISIS. Now, 2 years later, it's a totally different picture. It's primarily Iraqi forces that are involved. It's primarily different factions that are involved. The United States has a very limited, at least what's being reported is that the United States has a very limited involvement. 600 additional troops, American troops, were sent over to be a part of this offensive, but in a consultation role and a support role. It brings a total number of troops on the ground there just above 5,000. So America has about 5,000 troops there involved in this offensive in a consultative capacity. I want to show you a graphic of what this offensive looks like so you can get a better idea of all the players that are involved. And this is a image from the telegraph.co.uk. They have some great reporting on it. This image was actually very insightful. You can see all of the different players involved. The peachish area is what's controlled by ISIS or ISIL, coming from 3 different directions: from the east, from the south, and from the north. You have a government and affiliates forces coming in to Mosul. You have the Peshmerga, coming in from the north and from the northeast, and you have Shia militias coming in from the southwest, coming in to the city, and of course a Sunni Arab militia coming in, a smaller faction coming in from the west. This coalition of forces have basically one thing in common, and that's their hatred for Daesh, ISIL, the so-called Islamic State. Their hatred for ISIS. They all have, all of these, the Peshmerga, the Sunni, the Shia militias, the government forces, they all have competing interests, but they have a common enemy in ISIS. What's going to be interesting will be life after ISIS, at least in Iraq, in this city. So you have the Peshmerga, who are a part of the semi-autonomous Kurdistan. Kurdistan is looking, the Kurds, they're looking for sovereignty. And that sovereignty actually reaches over into this city where they are fighting. So even though they are fighting alongside, or at least their interests are alongside the Iraqi government doesn't really want the Kurds through the Peshmerga to actually get a stronghold in the city, because it violates and infringes upon their sovereignty. Then, of course, you have the competing branches of. I wouldn't necessarily say they're between the Sunni and the Shia militias that are involved. I really wouldn't say that that their differences are so religious based as much as power based. Sometimes we minimize any conflict between Sunni and Shia as being a religious division, when in actuality it's really a geopolitical division, power, land. But they are at odds. So the interesting, or the very telling story will be life after ISIS. Now, as of today, so far, all the reports from I can't say the front line, because there's not a lot coming from the quote unquote front line, but a lot of reporting come from there saying that the offensive so far has been successful. We will see. ISIS is very ruthless, as well as innovative, and so far they've struck back with everything from lighting oil fields to block the air assault that's being supported by the United States, to using suicide bombers, cars, to using traditional fighters, as well as using human shields. So we'll see how it goes. But if this succeeds, if this offensive succeeds, that really represents a major shift in this narrative that ISIS needs to continue to weave, which is a narrative of an inevitable caliphate. Like, a lot of their support comes from people who believe that ISIS is building a God-ordained caliphate. Therefore, their region is going to expand. And if this region that they expanded to now contracts and they lose, and not only do they lose, but they don't lose to the Americans, they lose to a coalition of nations that are predominantly Muslim. That absolutely eviscerates the narrative of a caliphate. That eviscerates this sense of inevitability that is a huge driving force in the radicalization and their recruitment efforts. So it's a very important battle, not just for territory, but an ideological and a narrative battle and a psychological battle for the minds of the people that would join ISIS because they believe in this so-called caliphate. You can't have a caliphate if you're losing land. You can't be the legitimate voice of Islam if not only are you losing this land, but you're losing it to a broad coalition of competing factions, of competing ideologies, competing political interests. All of them are predominantly Muslim. So we'll see how this strategy works, and the fight could go on for weeks. So we'll continue to report on it.